We're just giving Mr. Kime a few minutes to get back, and then we'll
He's only got little
start
legs.
up.
Yeah.
Probably still a bunch of people wandering around trying to find this place.
Yeah.
That's the fun part.
I'll see quick for one.
Well, they didn't have us actually on the schedule, even though we were scheduled, so it's a surprise.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gorilla appointment is
That's
one
right.
on the schedule.
We show up wherever the hell we want to.
Yeah.
Anywhere, anytime, any place, anyhow.
Unannounced.
It's good.
Sort of like a pop-up seminar.
Outside?
Yeah, let's put it down. That's the show. Might just be. Yeah, it's very nice place. But then that.
And then open up the floor to these distinguished gentlemen who we've flown in at great expense to answer all your questions, so I don't have to stand up here and look silly all the time. I am Vince Rossman. I'm head of sales for Black Library in the U.S. And as I said, just to give you a quick overview of what's coming up over the next month, the editors back in Nottingham have done a great job putting together some books I think you really enjoy. But without going into all the details, and just a quick, as I said, sort of the highlights, over the next coming months, you can expect some Sisters Battle novels. We had an original one by Jim Swallow. We're bringing that back along with a new one. Some more great Space Marine battles. There's a new Eisenhower versus Ravener book coming out in December. It's it's actually an audiobook. It's 2 CDs, so look for that in stores. We're also doing some unabridged Horus Heresy on audio that's coming out in January. You can get them as downloads now, but if you want the CDs, they're Thousand Suns and Prospero Burns. Also, we've got new Blood Angels coming out, new Blood Angels Omnibus. We've got some more Time of Legends. We've got some Dark Eldar novels coming by Andy Chambers. New Ben Counter stuff with Soul Drinkers. The next one in Nathan Long's book on Ulrika called Bloodsworn. And some more Horus Heresy. And there'll be some interesting limited edition stuff like you've seen we had on sale today. Look on our website for those. But also some great new books coming out, one of which is going to be an anthology called The Primarchs. So we'll let you figure out what that one is. In addition, look for Graham McNeil to do some more Iron Warrior or an Iron Warriors Omnibus. There'll be some new stuff in there. And basically continue fleshing out some of the lines we've got you've seen downstairs. Big thing I want you to keep in mind is look on our website. We've got some great information there. We've got Hammer and Bolter. See that? In case you didn't see this. Which is our monthly e-zine. Short stories in there, some of which you'll see in anthologies, and also which will lead into novels coming down the road. We've got some limited edition novellas on there, and some downloadable stuff. Our audio and ebook program is really building up, so you've got just about any e-reader, we accommodate that. So that's sort of an overview. I'll answer any specific questions about publishing, the titles that are coming out at the time, but for now, I'm just going to open the floor for the authors. In case you don't know who they are, Nick Kime.
Hello.
Nick Werner. And the estimable Mike Lee.
Estimable.
Estimable.
Wow.
I can be esteemed.
So, any first question from that? Yes, sir.
Extremely.
I have a Kindle and I'm trying to look up some ordinary books on there and it's like not coming up. Are you going to be putting any Black Library books on the Kindle?
Look at me.
Okay. Yeah, actually, you should be able to download books from the ebooks from our website and load them right onto your Kindle from there because they're EPUB. So just about any, the ones we sell on the website, just download there and they go to any e-device that are out there. Kindle, Nook, iPad, Sony e-reader. That's because of the format they use, they just copy it in there. Next. Something else? Come on, don't be shy.
What about print-on-demand titles? What upcoming
Because I like what you're doing with print on demand. Do you have any return of older titles and special editions on print on demand?
Yes. Just to give you an idea, we've got Inferno. If you remember, Inferno was our short story magazine a while ago. We're doing a print on demand of that.
Is it going to have like the entire Inferno up to between particular dates?
He says yes.
All right.
Yeah,
So we'll go with that.
it's going to be in several volumes. And the first volume, I think, is about the first 20 issues or something like that.
Oh.
And it will be like the original publication, so everything will be in there, even ads and stuff, with just like addresses and dates and things blocked out so people can't order stuff by mistake that was available like 20 years ago or something. But no, it will be just like, yeah, exactly.
20-year-old coupon, I'm sure.
Yeah,
Why?
so it's just
I didn't see an expiration date
Yeah,
on
so
it.
it's just like reading Inferno, but compartmentalized together.
Also,
Excellent.
there's going to be the Lone Wolves comic, which is going to bring back on print on demand. Title called Beneath the City of the White Wolf. The complete Cal Jericho, and those are the only ones I've got. We've got some limited edition stuff as well that's going to be coming out. Like, can we talk about that?
Yeah.
Let's see which one. Ultramarines novella. Ultramarines novella.
Yeah, sure. He's right.
Aurelian. Okay.
Yeah.
Aurelian, which is by Aaron Dembski-Bowden, and Terminator.
Oh.
So just to give you an idea.
So we want that already?
Didn't they make a movie on that already?
Question. Being that this is my first game today, I would love to know. Thank
That was a
you.
ripple.
Yes. And please forgive me, I don't know which books you each write.
Okay.
So, or series. So if you could let me know that, and then let me know which book that you've written is your favorite.
Cool.
Okay.
Start with
Tricky.
Start with the
All right. Well, I suppose I'm best known for writing the Salamander novels. You can get Salamander and Fire Drake today. I also wrote a novella called Promethean Sun for the Horus Heresy series, which is also about the salamanders. I've done a bunch of fantasy novels too. The Dwarfs Omnibus, which I co-wrote with Gav Thorpe, who's sitting over here to my left, and an Empire Armies novel called Grimblades, and a whole bunch of other stuff. It's really I think the salamanders I'm best kind of known for, and I guess the favorite novel that I've written would probably be, I'd say Promethean Sun. I think that's kind of the highlight, which is a novella rather than a novel, but that would, yeah. Okay, good stuff. All right.
What do you?
Well, currently I've been writing the Gracier Thankful series. In the past I've done the Witch Hunter series and Room of the Bounty Hunter series. I've also done several one-off books, Wolfric, Runefang, and the Chaos Waste books. If I had to pick, probably the one that I think is written the best out of them would be the first Witch Hunter, but certainly my favorite was the first Gracier book.
Okay.
Millions and millions of books.
Mr. Shaw.
My first series for Black Library was Warhammer 40,000 series called The Last Chances, which isn't currently available.
No. But will we?
Work on that, yeah. Will you?
After that, I wrote a trilogy called the Slaves to Darkness trilogy, which was sort of about the Empire and Chaos. And then I did the Dwarfs book, Grudge Bearer, which is in the Dwarfs Anthology Omnibus. And then I wrote some more books. Angels of Darkness, yeah, that's one I'm probably most famous for, is Angels of Darkness, 40,000. And then I've done the Time of Legends series, The Sundering, which is Malekith, Shadow King, Calador. And I'm currently partway through the Eldar Path trilogy, which is Path of the Warrior, Path of the Seer, and the third one will be Path of the Outcast. And I've done about 18 short stories over the years. Oh, there you go, Path of the Seer.
Oh, yeah.
That's right.
Hey, just throw it in.
Just throw it.
Rubbish.
My favourite, I don't know, the first one I did, Kill Team, Last Chances, I really enjoyed doing. My favourite, I think, has to be Shadow King, I think that's probably still my best, I think, in terms of characters and plot coming together and everything else. It's a longer novel, it's 150,000 words, so I get more done with it. So that's probably still the one I enjoyed writing the most.
I've written mostly fantasy. I started out with the 5-book Malice Darkblade series, co-written with Dan Abnett. After that, I did a single Horus Heresy book called Fallen Angels. And then after that, I've done a Time of Legend series about Nagash the Sorcerer, the great necromancer of the fantasy world. It's kind of like Sauron, basically, the Warhammer fantasy world. In addition to that, I guess 3 or 4 short stories, the odd novella. Yeah, that's about right. Yeah. In terms of what my favorite book is, that's kind of tricky. Okay, well, I'll break it down much like Clint did. I think the best written book of the 10 or so I've done is probably the second book in the Darkblade series, Bloodstorm, because there's so much double dealing and double and triple crossing between Malice and the other members of his family and the other characters in the story. It was a lot of fun setting up all the plots and schemes, having it all kind of unravel and come apart at the end. That was a lot of fun to do, and it was kind of technically challenging as well. In terms of favorites, anyone, just throw a dart. No, probably the final book in the Malice series, Lord of Ruin. The 5th book in the Malice series, Lord of Ruin, because it's the culmination of the series, and a lot of the character development and stuff that was seeded through the previous 4 books all kind of come to a head in that. So I think I had the most fun with, and at the end of the series, I actually survived my first 5 books, so it's dear to me.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
The Horus Heresy books, are you planning on revealing like any sort of secrets or mysteries of the Warhammer 40K series, like the 2 Lost Primarchs or the Start of the Inquisition?
Oh, I don't know what you're talking about.
La 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 la.
If you read the books, in fact, if you read First Heretic, there's hints of different things in there. But as far as, there's certain mysteries that I think will always remain mysteries because it tells a good story that way. But as we're going along, there are little secrets being revealed in bits and pieces. You just have to, and we will continue to do that because there's a lot of, obviously there's great gaps in the history of the heresy, and we're starting to fill that in. So as we do, you'll know more, and so a lot of things you thought you knew will be challenged. Yes, sir.
A while back, they used to make the Black Library character the little figures. If you could have one of your characters have that happen to, who would you choose?
One who hasn't got figures already.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
I was actually thinking Time of Legends.
Yeah.
Malekith and I would like to have a figure of Ulrika from Slaves to Darkness, actually. She'd be cool.
Yeah.
The first Sister of Sigmar, really. That's kind of what she ends up being. So that'd be kind of nice.
I think I would probably want either Hawklear, who is Malice's foil and trusty manservant, the fallen elf servant who follows him around, or Yasmir, his sister, who's the living saint of Cain. I think she'd be a cool looking figure with long daggers. Of course, she would. Well, anyway, it's a family. She won't be completely that. One of those two.
Oh, Brunner, hands down.
Yeah.
For me, it'd probably be Kira and Sugan in some kind of diorama where they're beating the hell out of each other, doing swords. That'd probably be, yeah.
Is there any plans to do that? Because I know occasionally Citadel would release a special edition miniature based on some of the fiction books, like I saw one, I think a couple years ago with C.F.S. King. Is there any plans to release miniatures based on Black Library novel characters?
We're not aware of any. I mean, we don't do them anymore.
And most of them were special edition.
Yeah.
They did do Gaunt's Ghost and
Yeah.
Tanith First
Years
and
ago,
things
we
like
did
that.
little dioramas of some of the characters in the book. We stopped doing that because really, we're in the business of making books, and the
We eat
Citadel part
that
is.
up. We love it.
Cast on the end.
It's I'm not aware of any plans at this point to do that. However, that said, every once in a while, the hobby side does dip into the Black Library and create characters based on figures based on some of the characters we do. I just at this point just not aware of any.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Do you guys get to pick, like, for example, your favorite chapters when you're writing these stories, or does somebody assign you the things, or is it a mix of both?
In what sense? You're talking about like Space Marine chapters?
Well,
or?
just, yeah, for example, like I know in kind of the salamanders,
Right.
Or with the Eldar path, so like you have a particular craft world.
Yeah.
Did you pick those because you have that army and you played and you like it, or was it?
Isn't there like an annual death match?
It's usually
Fighting
brass knuckles.
Feast of Blades, right?
They're
That's
like
at the feast,
posh.
yeah.
You have to choose. You got like a tray of weapons out. Stuff. That's not how it works. I think it kind of goes two ways. Sometimes an editor might suggest to an author, I think you'd be a good fit for this chapter or this faction or whatever, this character. And occasionally, an equal amount, an author will come to an editor and say, I've got a great idea for this series based on this particular chapter or these particular characters. I think sometimes it depends on what we've got coming out at the time, what other authors are writing about or have written about in the past, because there's a lot of background for 40k and Warhammer, a lot of stuff we haven't done, which we'd like to cover. So it's kind of cool. We don't necessarily want authors, to keep covering Ultramarines all the time, although that's interesting to see a different author's take on it. I think that's quite cool. Personally, for me, the Salamanders were just chosen because no one else had picked up on Salamanders. Really. Gav's done a short story and there was bits and pieces in the background, but nothing really substantial, so it gave me an opportunity as a writer to explore something that hadn't been explored before, and that's quite exciting, I think. That was a draw for me. And obviously as I learned more about them and got more into the chapter, I found it was something that was really quite close to my heart and something that I had a lot of passion for.
Yeah, as an author, I suppose, all the stuff that I do has always been proposed by me. So I went to Black Library and said, I want to do a trilogy on the Eldar. Actually, I said, do you want me to do a trilogy on the Eldar?
Right. May I?
And so that's kind of how that came about. And same with the Time of Legends and Sundering. So the only thing I've been asked to do really, was for series. So Black Library said, we would like you to do a Space Marine Battles book. But they didn't say what battle or whatever. I was free to choose that and propose what I wanted, but they were saying, well, it'd be nice if you did one in this series. And similarly with the first one, Angels of Darkness, it was a sort of a challenge that was laid down to me at the time, saying, we reckon you should do a Space Marine novel. Well, let's see what you come up with. So it's always just been personal preference, really, of what I wanted to write about. Whether that'll keep going. That said, the series I'm about to start, I'm starting 2 new series. One for Time of Legends, which is about the Vampire Wars, and one of which is a 40k series which continues with the Dark Angels. And both of those I've agreed to them, and it's after discussion. It's not, sort of like, we wanted to do this, but that's kind of been very 50-50 between me and the Black Library about what would be good to do next. So, because you want to see there's gaps in the background, and as Nick was saying, don't want to double up. And people are free to write about what they want. It doesn't matter that like Graham McNeil's written about Ultramarines, or other people can do Ultramarines if they want to. He hasn't, it's kind of like on them, but that's on top. Yeah. And same with me and Dark Angel stuff. But actually, for the Eldar, it's like, well, there's no definitive Eldar novels out there really. Not ones that have caught people's imagination. So I love Eldar, and I thought, well, there's a gap there as well. So it's kind of half personal, half commercial, really.
I have limited experience with this, of course, but in my case, they actually approached me. Lindsay approached me years ago and asked me to do a follow-on, the Horus Heresy, for the Dark Angels, and so I was sort of handed the Dark Angels chapter, and that was fun. I had a previous book to work off of that gave me characters and a basic plot, but then I got to explore the Dark Angels further and do kind of my own take on it based upon what had been done before. So yeah, it definitely runs the gamut between authors have the freedom to approach the editors with ideas and suggest chapters and characters and stuff, but otherwise sometimes they'll try to pair up an author with a chapter that they think will do a good job with. So
How did you get Malice?
how I get Malice? They asked for volunteers and everybody else took a step back.
And you're just still standing.
Yeah, I was like, what? Oh, okay, I guess I'll do it.
Is there anything you can say about the continuing storyline of the Dark Angels, since you just mentioned the fact that you're continuing that storyline with the Horus Heresy?
With the Horus Heresy?
Yes.
No idea.
Because we love it.
That's not true. The novellas anthology, the Primark novellas anthology that Vince mentioned, I am doing a novella on the Lion for that, which will move it forward a bit. And actually, I was on the flight over here, actually, and had a good conversation with Andy Smiley, who's sitting next to me, which actually resolved a few ideas. The Dark Angels, yeah, where they're going, they've got their own thing that they're doing, and the Lion definitely plays a huge part of that, and that'll kind of be revealed. And the trick with the Dark Angels thing, which is kind of really what Mike, I think, tried to do with his story, is make it feel more part of the main heresy. Their story, up until now, has always been a bit of a sideline, something else that happened at the same time. And so the trick is to make the Dark Angels feel more integral to the main war itself, and that's what we're trying to do. And through the Age of Darkness sort of novels that we're going to be doing, you actually find out how important the Dark Angels were in that period. But of course, nobody remembers that anymore. They just remember what happened after. So that's kind of, yeah. There's good. They've been bounced around a little bit and things like that. So actually, I don't know if there'll be any more novels. I mean, I hope so. But I'm doing a novella, and we'll see what happens after that. Really. Yeah.
With the works that you guys have done, and with other authors that have maybe branched off on what you've done, or maybe you're branching off on what other authors have done, do you find yourself going back to them, or do you find those newer authors coming back to you for maybe, why did you do this? Why this is a little unique in the story? What, where were you going with this? Maybe I want to explore that a little more.
I found myself going back to, there's a certain amount of interaction that everybody wanted us to do with Time of Legends, try and make everything kind of tied together. I'm trying to remember. I worked heavily with Dan on the Malice Darkblade stuff. He did a great job sort of putting my feet on the path and giving me a direction where to go, the characters and the overall storyline, and where he sort of saw things going. And I did my best to work off of that when I was working on the series. Fallen Angels, I was pretty much left to my own devices and just told, here's the previous story, here's a basic rough outline of what we'd like to see, go, and turn me loose. So it behooves you to try to work with the other authors as much as possible, because you want to have that continuity as much as you can, while still maintaining as much freedom as possible. So it is kind of a fine line to walk, but in my opinion, I try my best to work with the other authors as much as possible. In fact, I remember when I was working on Fallen Angel, and I was sending you a couple of emails asking about where you were going with certain things and what your take was on the Dark Angels.
Yeah, I mean, there's different things. The Heresy novels have a continuity. They're almost like, they're not 40k novels, they're a third world almost. And unlike Warhammer and 40k, each of our own series has its own continuity, but actually there's not necessarily a huge crossover between the different series and different authors in that. What I write in one of my novels doesn't necessarily change the world dramatically for what happens in somebody else's novels. But with the Heresy, there is actually an arc, a story behind each of the novels. So although they're each a standalone story, they're across this evolving backdrop. So for Heresy, there has to be quite a lot of communication, because I might kill off the character or not, or bring him back, or whatever. But each author, in the same way that each player has their own army, everyone who's got Karl Franz, in the background there's only one Karl Franz, but there's tens of thousands of people across the world who've got the model. And it's like, oh no, he died in my battle, sorry. Better phone up the Games Workshop and tell him they can't have him anymore. For authors, it's kind of a similar deal. I mean, not that you're going to kill off Karl Franz, but you add your own detail to the world. So my description of Altdorf might be slightly different from Clint's description, and that's what's actually interesting, is seeing how different authors interpret that common background.
Now, talking about continuity, I wanted to bring up Deliverance Lost.
Yeah.
Where is that going to be fitting in? I mean, I don't know how much you can tell us about it, but where is that going to be fitting in the timeline of the Horus Heresies?
Deliverance Lost, which is out in January. The Heresy novels going forward, again, there's going to be a little bit more in terms of the progress of the story. So there's been lots of filling in and backtracing and backtracking and
There'll still be a bit of that.
and there will be a lot of that, especially with like the novellas and short stories and things like that. But there'll be a much more of a feeling of progress towards that.
Okay, so we're kind of at that point now where the progression
so it'll start,
towards the
it's
end
not
date can begin.
Yeah. There's quite a long way still to go. I mean, as Gav mentioned earlier, we're entering a period called the Age of Darkness. There's an anthology of short stories that are based in that period or that look towards that period. So we've still got a lot of story. I mean, the galactic war between Horus and Chaos versus the Emperor has just begun, really, with the drop site massacre. It's kind of laid its cards on the table, and all the different pieces are kind of put into place.
Right.
So it's going to be an exciting road still,
Cool.
but still quite a long way to go.
So, as I understand too, this is the period where there's sort of a silence in the traditional Horus Heresy story, and we're filling in some gaps.
Yeah, there's about a 7 year
Maybe
war.
over.
So you're gonna find out a lot of stuff, and some of it there'll be some resonance from what came before, and some of it will resonate towards what happens in the future. So obviously everyone knows there was the siege of the Emperor's Palace, and we're quite a long way away from that still at this moment in time. But those stories that will feature in the middle in the Age of Darkness will look back and look forward at the same time, so they feel relevant and part of the story.
Anything you can glean on the Outcast Dead coming up? I know Graham's
Well,
not
say
here.
with Deliverance Lost and the Outcast Dead as well, Deliverance Lost follows on from the audiobook Raven's Flight and the short story in Age of Darkness, The Face of Treachery. It literally follows on from the end of Raven's Flight. The start of the novel is the Raven Guard getting out of his town. So, and the Outcast Dead is around about the same period. It's all so the next two novels are just after the massacre, and essentially the first reactions of what happens after Horus has gone, I'm bad, in fact, I'm sure that line's actually in there.
If it's not, it should be, yeah.
So that's what Deliverance Lost does, and it takes us up to, and it covers a period of a couple of years, actually. It's quite a long story, so.
All right, awesome.
Any questions? Yes, sir.
You're discussing interacting with your other Black Library colleagues. How do you interact with the people who write the codexes and the army books and the fluff in there?
Or do you?
No, it's too simple.
Send them annoying emails.
Stop changing things.
That's right.
On page 38, you said.
I think there's one important thing to bear in mind when you're talking about background in terms of a codex or a rule book versus a novel. The way that it's been described to me is that the 40k universe or the Warhammer universe is a big ball of cool stuff, and we all have got different investments in it, and we all experience it in different ways. And you can see that universe through different lenses. And if you're an author, you look at it through one lens and you see it in one way, you describe things in one way. Because there's certain things you can do in a novel that you'd never do in a rule book, you'd never do in a codex, because it's just not appropriate. And, why would you if it's not part of the battle game? Why would you do that? But obviously on the flip side of that, if you're a games designer, writing rules and background and stuff, you look at it through a different lens, and so you have a different set of kind of things that you need to do, and things that you need to describe, and things you need to focus on. So that's kind of, sometimes there will be a little bit of some ripples and wrinkles, I suppose, between the two, and that's because the needs of a war game and a gaming system are different to the needs of a novel. And it's very important to remember that thing. But as a writer and a games developer.
So as somebody who used to, when I used to be in games development, I fielded the questions from the library from authors most of the time, especially in Warhammer things. Why are you changing vampires again? What happened to the bloodlines? But so that's really the interaction actually. Is if by talking, it's usually via the editors. So it'll be a case of like the editors will say actually secret information or whatever, but they'll say actually we can get you a new version of the codex, a couple of months before it's out or whatever. If you're writing something so that it's meshes, that sort of thing. Or you can ask questions. So you say, well, actually, are you going to be changing X? Because I'm going to have one of those in my novel, not getting rid of them, or adding new stuff in. So I know with the Grey Lines, for instance, you want the novels to represent that same background.
Yeah.
So if the armies are expanding with each edition of the rule books, you don't want to feel the books are getting slightly outdated because you go, oh, well, you've got Land Raiders and they've been, there's actually 20 different types of Land Raiders now. But also actually sometimes deliberately not do that. Purging of Catalyst, that was based on a campaign pack that was years and years ago for 2nd edition 40k. And there were sample armies in it. I deliberately didn't add any of the new stuff in because I wanted, it's actually based on that idea. Those were the forces, that's still true. So there's loads of kind of cool Space Marine toys that I could have put into stories that I decided not to, because I wanted to kind of keep it true to that bit of the background. But like Nick says, everything's always just, everyone's got their own personal experience of that background. whether it's a reader, an author, a games developer, a computer games developer, somebody playing one online, whatever it might be, they have ownership of their background and how they interact with it. But there's certain things you just don't, like you don't kill off the emperor or well, okay.
I think there are some absolutes which you'd never change, and you'd never want to mess with that. But again, it's important to understand the distinction between what a novel needs and what a game system needs, and the two don't always necessarily match up exactly.
Have there been any occurrences where they would say, okay, we need some background fluff material for Codex, where they would turn to you guys as a group and say, can you help us out with this, or we're looking for some sort of fluff background?
No.
Doesn't really happen?
Well, I mean, again, back in games, we've stolen stuff in terms of taking Gaunt's Ghost and putting it into Imperial Guard, all that kind of stuff, but not as authors, I don't think. You don't get requests from the design studio to say, well, can we have X right into the background?
No, not like that. No.
But again, the attitude was to steal all the best bits. And so yeah, that's cool and that's popular, so we'll put that into the battle game or whatever it might be.
So it's more of a general idea that they go, oh, well, this name was in there, so let's put it in the Codex.
Yeah, but again,
It's cool, everybody loves it, let's throw it in the book, right?
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, if it's kind of popular or it fits a certain thing. But at the end of the day, the guys who work in the design studio are creators and they want to be making their own thing as well. So everybody wants to kind of do their own version of it, in a sense. So they're not necessarily beholden to what that library produces in detail, or which is why I never put dates on things, but or try not to, because otherwise it starts to set things in stone. So the closer it is to that interpretations idea rather than an absolute one size fits all, the better it is. But sometimes stuff translates back across, but sometimes it doesn't.
Have any of you guys ever had a plot idea that you were passionate about that got rejected by Black Library?
Rejected.
Like, I
Oh, the big red stamp.
Nope.
Silenced by the Inquisition.
I've had to do some couple of big rewrites before, mainly short stories, so maybe not that big. And you might agree something with your editor and you write it, and then something changes in the interim. Maybe a new piece of background gets written, or something comes to light, and suddenly the story that you'd written is
that won't work at all.
It's like, oh god. And yeah, I've had that happen a couple of times. But it's good practice. I mean, every writer will at some point have their albatross, which will kind of, the one book or the short story or several short stories where you just need to make the change. I don't think it's a bad thing to have to do that at all. Feels like a tough skin, doesn't it, I suppose?
Yeah, well, Malekith was the main one, because when I proposed the Sundering trilogy, it was very different from the way it ended up. Originally, it was just going to be a kind of a big... Well, no, we didn't really have Time of Legends then. And then Time of Legends kind of evolved, and what Time of Legends was about was characters, particular characters. So it was a Nagash, it was Sigmar. So the Sundering didn't quite fit into that. And then we essentially had an argument about what the title of the first book was going to be. I wanted it to be called Flames of Treachery. And then it kind of came back from the editors and sales going, we want to call it Malekith. And my original version, he didn't turn up until like the last third of the book. So there was a bit of a, well, I'm not sure we really want to call it about it. And he wasn't that big, because it didn't have the structure that the trilogy ended up with. And that was really revealing, really useful, because actually it was through that kind of discussion about the title that I realised I was writing the wrong book. And actually the characters I was writing about, people wouldn't care about, because they wanted to care about the named characters in the background, Malekith and Alathanar and all those guys that I ended up writing about. So I had to go back and kind of rewrite the book and make it Malekith, the story of Malekith. And then the second book being the story of the Shadow King, the third book. And so that was the biggest rewrite I've done, really. And that kind of, luckily I got to reuse a lot of it across the trilogy. The first one, of about 80,000 words, I had to lose about 40,000 and start again. So.
Yeah, it's actually same. We have to me
Somebody got shot.
It's gonna explode. The original outline for the first book for the Nagash trilogy was very different from what the final product was. I wanted to take the character in a different direction. I wanted to make him. Yeah, he was a crossdresser. No. But I wanted to make him more, I guess, a tragic figure, really. That he started out as this really a genius, a pillar of the kingdom, very ambitious, very dynamic, And the kind of guy that he can go either way depending on what decisions he makes with his life. So it's one of those cases, kind of like with Heresy, where you can see decision points where, if he just picked up that puppy, how different things might have been. But no, he rejected the puppy and became totally evil. And it has sort of a tragic love story set up with him and his brother's wife, and things were end terribly and everything. And I submitted it, and they said, nope, can't do it. The guy's just evil. Period. And you actually said that.
That was from me.
He was just bad from the beginning, bad to the bone. Okay, so do all that out.
Simpleton.
Did a whole nother. It's all his fault. Did a whole nother outline, and they approved that and carried on.
Of course.
That was the only really just complete and total rewrite I've ever had to do. Thanks for that.
That's all right. I was just sitting there thinking, I remember right.
Yeah, I did that. Yes.
That was a cool story. So I think it was because it clashed a bit.
Sure, you say that now.
With other characters, that tragic thing. So I thought it'd be cool that he was just an asshole from the start.
Pretty much, yeah. Pretty much. Yeah. And that's what I did.
I was going to say, a lot of times Nick or Lindsay or the editors catch a lot of this stuff right in the outline form. So you end up not investing a lot of time on something that's not going to end up in the final product. One that jumps to mind right away is working on Temple of the Serpent. Originally there wasn't a human element to it. It was just strictly going to be Skaven and Lizardmen. And Nick felt that he needed a more recognizable point of view to kind of offset the two alien perspectives between Skaven and Lizardmen.
It's always better if you can nip that sort of stuff in the bud at pitch or synopsis stage, because obviously you get to the point, there's less words involved for starters, and when you get to the point where you've done a 100,000 word novel and then it crumbles, you're kind of in trouble there. Because if you've just got a 20-page synopsis, that's much more manageable.
That's what it's for, really.
Yeah. Checks and balances, right?
Is there anything from each of your back catalogs that you wish you could go back to, or that you miss doing?
What I rewrite, or what do you mean?
No, just revisiting a story, extending the storyline maybe that you haven't, that you left off somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
I wanted to do some more Last Chances.
I wanted to do a sequel to Outbreak.
Actually, I would like to do more dwarf stuff. There was an engineer character in Grudge Bearer who I'd like to do a novel about. He's a mad engineer, a weird, paraffin-fueled gyrocopter and stuff like that. So, and there's another character in there, Drown the Reckoner, as well. So I'd like to do some more of those characters at some point. There's so many things you can do, and only so many novels you can write, and only so many that Black Library publish. So it's always a case of when rather than if. 10 years from now, I might get the chance to do one of those novels. It's not going in. We still get 3 novels a month, or whatever it is. So that's 36 novels a year. You get through quite a lot of ideas quite quick. So.
I think the only one that I can think of that I occasionally would be fun to explore would be a series of stories about Hawklear and what's left of the Druchii mercenaries that he's working with at the very end of Lord of Ruin, because there's a point where his path and Malice's path diverge, and Malice goes off to do other stuff. I don't want to drop any spoilers, but he goes off to continue his quest, leaving Hawklear behind, mortally wounded, but healed somewhat with this horrible power that Malice has. And I thought it could be an interesting series of side stories to see what happens to Hawklear and the mercenaries, what kind of trouble they can get into. But I honestly don't know if that's something Black Library would even be interested in, because it's such. Okay, well, fair enough.
We got the green light now.
But that's the closest thing I could think of that I'd want to follow at this point.
Yeah, I know for me it'd be Matthias Thulman. I'd like to do some more of the Witch Hunter books.
Is there any sort of push to kind of line up the stories that come out with the various releases on the hobby side?
If it happens, it's nice, but I think it's just practically it's quite tricky to do.
The way we look at it is each of the releases in the Black Library schedule has to stand on its own. It has to be commercial and right without anything to support it. We do get an opportunity to release a book. Put in the oven. If we do get an opportunity to release a novel alongside the Codex, and that's great, because obviously everyone's very excited about Codex blah and book blah, and so the two will work very well together. And yeah, that's fantastic when we can do that, especially if the novel reflects some of the changes that have been made to the codex. I think we touched on some of this earlier, didn't we? But it's certainly not a sort of prerequisite for how we put the schedule together.
Not something like Storm of Magic.
Yeah, that's true. Occasionally, I mean, that was easy to. Well, actually, it wasn't easy at all. It was really hard to get all these books out. It's an absolute nightmare. But anyway, putting that to one side, because they were shorter, we were able to move quite quickly on that. And I sent some fairly urgent emails to some of our, one of them sat over here, to some of our fancy authors saying, "Oh, I need some Storm Magic books, please. Any chance you could write one? What do you know about it? Not a lot, really. It's called Storm Magic." That was kind of it. So occasionally we'll, and with when the box games come out, occasionally Warhammers, things like that, we've started to release novellas alongside those. But again, they're shorter projects. It's easier to turn that around. I mean, as an author, it's easier to write 30,000 words, or in theory anyway, than 90 to 100,000. Certainly, the amount of time you have to invest in actually putting the words down.
And just to give you an idea, from the standpoint of getting a book published, we have to plan this stuff out at least a year in advance, sometimes a little bit more, just because the way the selling schedules and the way stores take books in, you sell them 6 months or more in advance of when they release. So you have to have a somewhat rigid schedule. Whereas on the hobby side, that, because the GW controls that a little bit better, it's a little bit more flexible schedule. So they may change things around as they need it. We have to keep ours. So it's difficult. It would be difficult for us to match that up anyway. So we just know Nick and, well, not this Nick, or your author Nick today.
No, I'm the same.
You should be editor Nick and author Nick. And the folks back they have to sit ahead and plan this out. And then obviously then they have to go out to the writers and say, okay, we need this, this, and this by this date. So they can put it in their schedule, because it takes several months to write a novel, and they want to know what the next one is after that. So it's a very detailed process, very complicated, little Chinese puzzles and stuff all over the place. Other questions, anyway?
How about deadlines? Are they your friend or your enemy?
Always the enemy.
Always.
I love the sound of it.
No, they're an editor's friend. Deadlines are good. Yeah. And they can either be, you can use them as a carrot or a stick, depending on how close the author is to hitting that particular deadline.
All right, so that was editor Nick. Now how about author?
Sorry,
Nick?
I slipped them back. Deadlines hate them.
Oh yeah, horrible.
Oh,
No, actually, deadlines are great.
they're massively useful, actually.
Well, because
Kick in the
if I hit that
pants, isn't
deadline,
it?
that's when I get paid.
It's the point. It gives you a point of focus as well. I think there are times in the past where we've given authors kind of amorphous deadline. Oh, just get it in when you can. And it hangs around for ages because they've got no specific date when they've got to do something. But it's better for us, and I think it's better for authors. And we've all missed deadlines from time to time, for sure. Yeah, but I think they're quite. Without them, it'd be carnage.
Oh yeah.
Absolute carnage.
It's true. I mean, there's a difference between kind of being a career novelist author who's going to need to produce lots of books to somebody who's going to be a writer who writes and then have a book published at some time in the future. So what we do is we're commissioned by Black Library to write a novel by a certain date, and actually only have to be very professional about that. And editors, if you miss lots of deadlines, editors will stop phoning you up. Sending you emails, and funny enough, you go, "Oh, actually, you're not a writer anymore. You're just somebody without a job. You're just sitting in your pants for no reason." So
Maybe.
actually, that's part and parcel of it. As I say, these guys, behind the scenes, there's lots of work that has to go into turning words into a novel, which takes several months as well. And actually, if you miss that, then you're just making other people's lives harder and harder to hit their internal deadline. So it's just not cool, really. I mean, there's missing a deadline. Actually, it's going to be a couple of weeks late, and then there's I've not started yet. But so try to. There's flexibility always in the plans, but you want your editors to be your friends.
The other problem is if you don't have a set time that you have to bring it in, you're just going to keep tinkering with it, and it'll never come out.
Yeah, exactly.
It's true.
Clint, I wanted to ask you a question. You've done the majority of your work's been Warhammer
Yes.
novels. Any thoughts of breaking into 40K? I saw that there's an upcoming one by you, Dead Winter.
Dead Winter is going to be a Time of Legends.
It's Time of Legends?
The
Okay.
First entry in the Black Plague.
Okay. And then, so is there any thoughts of doing 40K in the future?
Well, I've
or-
had two 40K short stories.
Right.
One's in Fear of the Alien, and the other one's in Victories of the Space Marines. And we've been discussing doing a Space Marine Battles book.
Okay. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Okay, I'm just going to take two more questions, and you can, after this, you can obviously get them downstairs and ask them more questions. But
They'll be behind bars, but.
Get them in a corner and let's roll a little bit. Why did you do that to me? Yeah. All right. So, next question, anyone? You want to guess it?
I know that there's the upcoming Space Marine video game. Do you think you might do a book on that?
Nope. Sorry. No, I think I can see why you'd ask that question. I think they say we've done tie-in stuff before, and
Well,
we
Dawn
always
of War.
kind of ask ourselves, what is the best use of our author's time? What is the best use of our schedule here? Because although we do publish and produce a lot of books, there's only a finite number we can put out in any given year, and we have to kind of ask the question: do we want what is the best use of our time? Is it producing a book based on a video game, or is it producing a brand new Space Marine series by a brand new author? And invariably, the answer is the latter rather than the former.
Like, for instance, if your best book like that you tie in is Get the Ultramarines Omnibus, and you've got all the good stuff in there about Ultramarines and Space Marines.
Or get a brand new Ultramarines book.
Or you can buy Salamander. Either.
Nice plug there.
Well, as we were saying earlier, the demands of narrative for a video game are different to the demands of narrative for a novel. Generally, there's a lot higher demands in a novel. So,
What are you trying to say?
well, with Space Marine is unashamedly brainless in the sense that you run around and hit things, and it's all really cool.
Yeah.
There's only so much you can sustain with that in a novel.
Well, occasionally shoot things.
Yeah, occasionally shooting. So you'd have to, the amount of work you have to do to add story in to something like that, you might as well write a story from scratch.
And I think if you're playing Space Marine, you love it, and you want to get more Space Marine fix, there are novels already out there that you can read, and I think that's probably the way to go. That will add a different level, a different dimension to your understanding of the universe and the background than a book based upon the video game would.
Okay, and one last question. You, sir?
What sort of sources do you like to go to for inspiration when you're writing your stories?
Sources. Barbecue, my favourite. Yeah.
No.
Silly boy.
Sorry.
I know.
Sorry.
That's a good question.
Do you mean like what codexes and things, or?
For like shows or other stories that you've read, or
Oh, right. Okay.
Inspirations, I guess you could say.
Inspiration,
Yeah.
influences.
Yeah, I think it's all just to kind of install it all. You pick
Life
bits and
experience,
pieces from
really.
everything. All the stuff you read, all the stuff you watched, codexes, other people's books.
Music.
Music, yeah. I mean, it's not any one thing per se. It's just I don't know about you guys, but my huge trash brain, whirling bits of story and information and trivia and crazy stuff. And
I've heard
out of
that kills
all
your hair.
What are you trying to say?
Just,
And out of
full
all
head.
that, you just
That's the hair choice.
He's got,
It is.
is it?
Yes.
Okay.
It's the
Got no room in there for hair. It's all filled with other important stuff.
Exactly,
Right.
important stuff.
That's what I'm saying.
Right. But no, you pick things out almost. It's almost like a subconscious process. Your brain puts these things together, and you put them on paper, and you see if they work. I don't know if there's any specific thing I go to for that kind of inspiration.
I think with Black Library fiction, it's important because Warhammer and Warhammer 40,000, the worlds themselves are based upon sort of history and literature and new music and stuff. So it's important to go to the source material as well, to go back to the original inspiration of what these things were and kind of take from that. So you're not just getting the Warhammer version, you know what the reality is behind the Warhammer version. So if you're writing about the Empire, then you want to read up about the Holy Roman Empire that it's based on. If you're writing about Space Marines, then it's good to know about sort of Knights and Templars and that kind of stuff. So you're not just getting the sort of like the photocopied fantasy version, you know what the real version is, or if there's like literary reference used to kind of understand what inspired it, and I think that's good. Otherwise you end up not being inspired by something, but being derivative of something, so you end up with something that's a bit shallow and just a bit of a copy of a copy of a copy. So it's important to go back and refresh from that original source, really.
Yeah, I think what Gav hit on with history is absolutely spot on. I mean, I've got a 2-room apartment with one room just packed with history books.
Wow.
Everything from stacks of World War II stuff.
Dedication right there.
The Black Plague, thanks to you.
I didn't start it.
Bunch of old traditional Japanese stuff, so just a little bit of everything. I also like to delve into the actual folklore behind something, so maybe you can actually pull something from the source. As you go back to the Old Norse, dwarves are completely different from any fantasy setting that's been around there. So if you can take a little bit of that and seed it back in, you can kind of put a new spin on what's almost become sort of a cliche or a stereotype.
You've kind of got to be a sponge, really, just absorb everything that life experiences, stuff that you read. Pretty much what Mike was saying, really, just everything and anything somehow will inform in some way how your brain works and how you tackle a certain thing or how you work a certain narrative, and then obviously you apply all the rules and the mood and tone from the Warhammer and the 40k universe, so it feels like a novel about that universe, set in that universe.
All right, well, listen, thanks very much for coming. Like I said, come back down to the stand. You can ask us questions about books or anything.
Hooray! Hooray!
Colonel. Yeah.